roll call in just a moment here. Good morning and welcome to the June 22nd Special Executive Committee meeting. Recognize that we're having today's meeting on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of Métis Nation, specifically Zone 4. Welcome everyone in the spirit of working together to solve problems together. Purpose of this meeting is to hear from speakers on the Reimagined Services Update report, which Council received or started to receive yesterday at City Council. We had requests to speak from folks. That list has now grown to 17 speakers, which I think we should be able to hear from today and perhaps ask at least some questions of. How far we'll get in the allotted time remains to be seen, though. As adjournment is currently scheduled for noon, so we'll keep an eye on that, get as far as we can get today, and then this matter would otherwise go back up to council once we've finished hearing from folks, and we may be able to ask some questions today, but if we can't get into that robustly, we may just send it back to council once we've heard from speakers, which is our primary reason for being here. So welcome to members of council and members of the public who have tuned in to participate. I'll just first roll call members of committee and then check in with who else is able to join us. Vice Chair McKean had let me know that he's got a medical appointment and is not able to join us at the start of today's meeting and may or may not be able to join us as his time permits. Councillor Cartmell, are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Hamilton?
Good morning.
Good morning. And Councillor Walters?
I'm present, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. So we have quorum and then some for the committee itself, and then let me just run through other members of council just to see who's with us. I suspect many will be, as this time was appropriated from council, so it's in everybody's calendars. Councillor Banga, are you with us this morning? No?
I'm here.
Oh, you are? Okay, great. And Councillor Cartmell, I checked in with already. Councillor Katarina?
Good morning.
Morning. Councillor Zadok? No? Okay, that's okay. Councillor Essinger?
Good morning.
Morning. Councillor Hamilton, I checked in with already. Councillor Henderson? I see you there.
I'm here.
Morning. Councillor Knack?
Good morning.
Morning. Councillor McKean has a medical. Councillor Nicol? Councillor Nicol? How about Councillor Paquette?
Good morning.
Morning. And Councillor Walters we checked in with already. So that's most everyone. All right, so I need a motion to adopt the agenda again for the sole purpose of hearing 5-1, but we still need that motion. One of the committee members.
moved.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Please vote to adopt the agenda.
Yes.
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 We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried unanimously. Protocol items this morning, I don't think we had any planned. So selection of items for debate, I'll just select 5-1, since it's why we're here, and we have requests to speak on it. So I do need a motion now. I don't know if anyone's got the list of the 17 speakers handy. Have we had any additional registrations since this list was produced?
We have not.
Okay, so do any of the committee members have that list?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Cartmel.
Thank you. I'll move that committee hear from the following speakers and panels where appropriate. Number 1, Greg Maddie from the Edmonton District Labour Council. Number 2, Raquel Farreau. Number 3, Joshua Wolchansky, 4, Steve Hogel from Hockey Edmonton and the Arena Users Group. Number 5, Laura Cunningham Shepley from the EFCL. Number 6, Greg Riemann. 7, John Mervin from QP Local 30. 8, Lanny Chudik from CSU 52. 9, Steve Bradshaw from ATU 569. 10, Colleen Switzer. 11, Julie Kusek. 12, Mike Scott. 13, Corey Longo. 14, Brad LaFortune from Act for Edmonton. 15, Christy Krezanowski, pardon me for that. 16, Lisa Brown. And 17, Rebecca Goldsack from the Lewis Estates Community League.
Thank you. I think it'll be one big panel, so please vote to hear from the panel.
Yes. Councillor Cartmel?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried. Okay, so then just to orient each of our speakers, and I'll come to you in a moment with a bit of a roll call sound check. The way this will work, and many of you have presented before, but for those of you who may not have participated virtually or even in person in the past, we'll invite you to offer your comments one after another. You'll each have 5 minutes. Given the number of speakers in our short time, I will rigorously enforce the 5 minutes. So please get a timer or use the timer feature in your phone or something to help manage your own 5 minutes and stay within it. I will stop you hard at the 5 minutes, so just fair warning. Once we've heard from everybody, there will doubtless be questions from our side of the table here, and so please stay on the line if you're able, and but please remain muted unless or until there is a question directed to you specifically, just to cut down on echo and background noise. And another note that we would kindly request that you refrain from using the chat function in the meeting, as it can create issues of fairness or decorum at times, and also interfere technically with the live stream. So we appreciate that your time here is to be heard in the format of a public hearing, and that's the best way for us to respectfully hear from everybody in turn. Finally, if you're having any technical challenges or have any questions about the process, you can reach out to the city clerks through the information provided in your registration or via city.clerk@edmonton.ca. So I'll now run through the list just to make sure that we have a good connection, can hear you, and you know the order in which you'll be speaking as well. So pay attention to who's ahead of you. So Greg Maddie is up first.
Here, thank you.
Good morning. Second will be Rocky Farreau.
Thank you.
Good morning. Third will be Joshua Wolchansky.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Fourth will be Steve Hogel.
Good morning.
Good morning. Fifth will be Laura Cunningham Shipley.
Good morning.
Good morning. Sixth will be Greg Raymond.
Good morning.
Morning. Seventh will be John Mervin.
Our office has been in contact with John, and they're helping him join.
Okay. Eight will be Lanny Chudik.
Good morning.
Good morning. 9 will be Steve Bradshaw.
We haven't seen Miss Bradshaw join.
Okay. 10 will be Colleen Switzer.
Good morning.
Good morning. 11 will be Julie Cusick.
Good morning.
Morning. 12 will be Mike Scott.
Good morning.
Good morning. 13 will be Corey Longo.
And they've let us know that they may be late joining.
Understood. 14 will be Brad LaFortune.
Good morning.
Good morning. 15 will be Christy Krezanowski.
Our office has reached out.
16, Lisa Brown.
Morning.
Morning. And 17, Rebecca Goldsack.
And same, we'll make contact and see if they can join.
Okay. I'll ask you to each mute yourselves again, just to be on the safe side, again, to cut down on the echo. So again, you'll each have 5 minutes. Mr. Mady, you're up first.
Did you want some introductory?
Oh, sorry. Mr. Corbould was going to provide some introductory context here before we get into the speakers. So go ahead, Mr. Corbould. Apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to be back for further discussions on Reimagine Service Initiatives and to provide you with an update on our discussions yesterday. Before I do, I want to clarify 2 financial items raised yesterday, one on parking and the second on implications for property taxes. So first, parking revenues realized within the Reimagine Services totals 1.7 million over 5 years, growing after the initial investment in upfront equipment to over $400,000 per year. This recommendation, while perhaps not popular, is consistent with the fiscal policy on revenue generation, C-624. I was concerned that you may have been left with the impression that this revenue was just $400K over the entire 5 years and therefore not worth pursuing. But as you can see, there is a cumulative impact benefit that grows over time. As I have learned since being in the city, we change our financial picture in increments of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and no amount is too modest to consider if it is going to help us hold the line on the directed taxes 0% increase. Reimagine Services has been about looking for cost savings and revenue generation that would cause the least amount of public disruption while keeping our eye on the bottom line. As you well know, these trade-offs are not simple. Second, our current tax increase sits at an approved 1.8% for next year. This does not include projected revenue losses and potential additional costs related to financial effects of COVID, which could result in a financial gap equivalent to a 5% levy next year based on our current projections. This puts into context the financial parameters under which we are working and why we are taking the need to look for savings and revenue generation so seriously. Yesterday, there was a request for information about the KPMG reports, which are the business cases that describe the quantity, the expected benefits of each of the measures, including factors such as the financial information, strategic alignment, GBA plus impacts, risk analysis, and performance measures for each of all of the opportunities. Administration was already in the process of making the reports public, but I have asked for those reports to be reviewed more quickly in light of our obligation we may have under the in light of any obligations we may have under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. I expect that review will take about 2 weeks, and we are working hard to ensure the reports are public before we come back to City Council on July 5th. Once the review has been completed, the information will be shared online, and we will communicate to those who want it. The second item raised yesterday was the extent to which information was shared and information was gathered with the public. At each milestone, information was shared publicly and posted on the city's websites. We have been transparent, but we have not vetted these cost savings options with the public, believing that we needed to bring definitive advice to council. As always, as an administration, we are balancing the need to act with the need to ask. And in this case, we feel that our primary obligation was to bring cost savings and revenue generation measures before you in order to fulfill the budgetary mandate you have set for us. Beyond listening to the speakers who are registered today and providing the report, updated information will be posted on the city's website to provide an option for Edmontonians to send feedback in for consideration, and we remain committed to listening, but a path for savings somehow has to be determined. Depending on the information received today, next steps may include reviewing the material which comes forward today, releasing the reports, and providing time to receive additional feedback for consideration. We could then update financial recommendations to come forward as part of budget adjustment deliberations in the fall. Or if there's a specific item, such as parking, you would like us to cease work on, then please let us know and we will, of course, follow Council's guidance. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from the speakers today.
Thank you, Mr. Corbould. Both helpful pieces of context for today's discussion and as well as coming back to council in 2 weeks. Okay, so now, Mr. Mady.
Good morning, Mayor and Councilors. Just in case some of you may have forgotten who I am, my name is Greg Mady. I'm a post worker, community member, activist, and the elected president of the Edmonton District Labour Council. Having read through this report and the initial Reimagine document, as well as countless studies on the results of privatization of city services, including Edmonton's own failed attempt to save money by privatizing part of waste collection, I feel there is a very easy way to summarize this issue. It's clear that some of you haven't examined the evidence proving that when it comes down to public services, the idea that private industry does it better doesn't hold true. I understand that council is looking for ways to cut to pay for the tax freeze for this year and the laundry list of projects that they have added on the budget in 2018. Not to mention the hundreds of millions spent each year on consultants. It's either that or the motivation is an ideological commitment to killing public services. To give you the benefit of the doubt, I'll assume it's the former. But the reality is that giving the most profitable parts of our public services to private entities to run is not the silver bullet some of you might think it is. Those of you who read the reports and ask good questions know that 40% of Edmonton's waste budget currently services private contracts, lining the pockets of international shareholders who siphon off profits by paying workers garbage wages. And that pun is intended. You also should know, if you don't, that those contexts do not provide good value for public dollars. And that's the key word, public dollars. That is money that Edmontonians work hard to earn, and they expect it to be used to benefit their community and the people who live and work there. I watched council pat its back when they instituted a living wage policy and created a task force to end poverty. I watched council vote unanimously in favor of a sustainable procurement policy that is supposed to leverage social good from city dollars. How can you possibly say that you support those things while at the same time you're contemplating undermining both of those things entirely? It's really frustrating when your leaders say one thing and then do another. The other variables we can discuss are the quality of services and user fees. This report clearly shows that potential private partners are saying that they would require the ability to charge more, change services without any democratic oversight, unless we're willing to pay them extra to do what the city is already doing. They admittedly say that they will also require additional subsidies from the city, much like the YMCA already did for their own operations. It is hard to think of any savings at all in the long run. All you would be doing is transferring tax dollars into higher user fees, lower purchasing power for workers, and lower purchasing power for workers to be able to shop at local businesses in their neighborhoods. Looking at the most optimistic projection of implementing every recommendation in the report, you would only be creating a savings of $2.7 million a year, which is essentially amounts to a rounding error on the city budget. How much did you spend on consultants to generate this report? How much staff time has been spent consulting with the private sector? You probably could have saved over $1 million right there. With this in mind, it becomes obvious that any slight variance experienced during the year will end up costing the public more than they currently pay. Turning public money into private profits does not help our economy in the slightest compared to letting working people live with dignity, being able to afford to raise a family and contribute to their community and local economy. Moral arguments aside, I truly don't understand how using logic, reason, and all the studies available to you, you can justify implementing any of these recommendations under the guise of cost savings. I invite all of you to recognize that this doesn't provide the answer you were looking for and to reject the proposals in this report. Thank you very much, and I do look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Next is Raquel Farrell.
Thanks. Yeah, I just ditto. At a time when we're championing community benefit agreements and social procurement and hopefully shifting from a culture of rewarding money creators to that culture of rewarding value creators, I too am interested in listening today to see how more power and flexibility can be given to local partners without cutting our public benefits and compromising the public value. I feel we need to be very careful here with Reimagine. We have to be careful to honor value creation and public services, and very careful to curb the profit motive. yeah, we need to maintain our drive for value creation. So I think it's very, three things stood out for me, and the first is that we need to be very careful to honor collective bargain agreements so that we can honor gender-based analysis, living wages, and health benefits. So consider how this will affect our collective bargain agreements. And golf courses also stood out to me. My interest is in better land use and stewardship of our public spaces, particularly those in the River Valley, and so privatization should come with a clear mandate to manage without as much water, without pesticides, without as much encroachment into wildlife corridors, and to provide additional winter access while honoring unions and fair wages. So, yeah, also, I'm interested in the parking issue. I think that if we're going to start charging parking fees, that money should be used to subsidize bikes and buses. I mean, I like it in as much as it might shift us out of our attachment to private cars, but it feels rather mean-spirited to charge parking in our public spaces, in our commons. And I also am very interested in how we proceed with local partners. I see some good intentions in this report in terms of sort of honoring more local ability, more autonomy in local owners like community leagues. So I think we should be very careful how we partner with leagues and in ways that we can honor local stewardship and control over tripartite lease lands. And on that, I note that Laura Cunningham Chapley is speaking today, so I'll defer to her. So I think that's it, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Joshua Wolshansky.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Council, Administration, and fellow speakers. A very happy Wednesday to you. Wanted to start off by saying that I appreciate the referral from Council for the opportunity to speak. In a good relationship, communication is key, and no relationship is more key than
Sorry,
the
Mr.
citizens with Council.
Mr. Wolshansky, I'm going to have to
Yes.
ask you to remove your button. There's no campaigning in a council meeting.
Gladly.
Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you. I rise today in opposition to the budget management proposals. This report, which cost $1 million to generate, will realize approximately $16 million over the next decade. We could talk about how fees at parks and specialized facilities, we should be increasing access to parks, increasing access to green spaces, and shouldn't be looking to disincentivize people to go to this, especially until we're sure that the ETS redesign is key and that public infrastructure can support it. We could talk about privatization of golf courses, which will lead to greater administrative burden for the city, worse value for public dollars, and encourages private profit on public infrastructure. We could talk about the optics, the message that this sends. When tourism development is a priority, the optics of Edmonton shuttering its services, of not investing in its workforce, in investing in its services. But I think trying to get too into the weeds here will lose the forest through the trees. There's a larger narrative at play. Councillor Paquette put it really nicely yesterday, I think. Administration was tasked with some pretty intense lifting. They were asked to go back and do homework as to what levers were available so that we could hold the line on a 0% tax increase. And administration completed that task. The package is not exactly palatable, and I think a lot of us are on the same page there. I think the broader narrative here is that the workforce, that administration, that city services are in danger of dying a death of 1,000 cuts. Frankly, we're running out of options to hold the line on a 0% tax increase. $16 million over 10 years, that doesn't account for the staff time to implement this. That doesn't account for the other competing priorities where staff time could be better used. At a time when Many workers have been laid off, others are in danger of being laid off or privatizing other services. City staff are pulling double duty, triple duty. You know, this also doesn't take into account the amount of money, of taxpayer time spent paying council and paying administration to deliberate this report. Frankly, the ROI, the return on investment, just isn't there. We only have 24 hours in a day, and I think pursuing these initiatives, it's not prioritizing services to citizens. It's not prioritizing city services, our workforce, and it's not standing in solidarity with the Edmonton that I know that we all want to create and that we all want to build. So I emphatically ask council to stop this report in its tracks, and for us to re-examine other ways of holding the line, if that is where appetite is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolchansky. Next is Steve Hogle.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and the administration team. We thank you for this opportunity as always. A newcomer came to our offices yesterday. Igor Borodin arrived just a week ago from Lithuania. One of his first stops was Hockey Edmonton so he could get his boys, 6-year-old Gordej and 12-year-old Miron, signed up for hockey. It was his wife's idea to seek a better life in Edmonton and for the boys to enjoy everything it has to offer. And these are the type of people I think about when I listen to the debate regarding the Reimagined Services update. And some of the comments we heard yesterday give us cause for concern. We are grateful to have almost 10,000 players who come from all walks of life, community hockey to elite programs, girls and boys, we all play here. We're even considering playing outside this coming season near 118th Avenue to engage kids who might not otherwise play. The point is, it doesn't matter what the ability of players like Igor's boys, we will have a place for them to play. We're also grateful our not-for-profit organization receives a minor sports rate for some ice slots at arenas. We also pay full fare for other slots. Collectively, we put in more than $4 million in an average season into city coffers, and usually we're down a couple of arenas, so it could be even more in the future. So when we hear new pricing, programming, and rental models will be examined, this may result in a reduction in the amount of subsidized rates and rental port time and programs, and increased fees will be under consideration. We get concerned. Reduced subsidies and or increased fees would have a huge detrimental impact on our programs. We are a not-for-profit, and we are also a not-for-loss. We run a lean operation, and we would have to pass on costs to the families of players. And we have no doubt who would be the hardest hit. We fear many families in the community and recreation leagues would not be able to handle an increase in fees. And that's where 90% of our players play. And that potential erosion of our base would be a threat to the revenue we generate for the city. Hockey Edmonton understands the bleak financial landscape created by COVID, and as the biggest arena user, we want to do our share resolving the challenges and ensuring the supply of ice to sport organizations. While we stepped up to offer to run Oliver Arena, we understand where it's at in its life cycle and the valuable property it sits on. We want to be part of the conversation. We've had a leadership position on the city's Arena Users Committee, where we work with groups from figure skating to ringette to sledge to roller hockey to ensure everyone is treated fairly. We've also led the way installing cameras in arenas to show off the city and celebrate the people and the activities we see on the ice, from the Timbits Jamboree to the International Figure Skating Union Championships and everything in between. We don't care who gets the credit, but let's work together. We had one brief meeting with KPMG where we and others expressed an interest in discussing enhanced partnerships with the city and creative solutions in this current trying environment, and we never heard from anyone after that. So when we saw this report coming to council, we were very interested, and as I mentioned, it gives us cause for concern. Is the concern well-founded? We're unsure, since we don't know the details of what is behind the words I quoted earlier. We think it would have been beneficial to have some deeper conversations with stakeholders before this went to council. Having missed that opportunity, let's have those discussions now. If the goal is to have these changes implemented in the 2022 budget cycle, we need to move quickly. So really, I'm asking for 3 C's: communication, clarity, and collaboration. We want the city to involve us and not just inform us. We've had a great partnership with city councils and city administrations for the better part of 60 years, to the benefit of the people in our communities. Let's build on that so we can effectively serve our 10,000 players and their families, from longtime residents to newcomers like Igor and his family from Lithuania. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Lori Cunningham-Chapley.
Good morning, Mayor Iveson and City Councillors. While the Reimagine Services Update provides much information about new ways of doing business, over the last week, the EFCL has been actively meeting with leagues in regards to our new tripartite license agreement. As you know, this agreement lays out the relationship and responsibilities between the three parties for the next 10 years. It details the use of land carved off the municipal reserve land in neighborhoods specifically for public recreation use and which is often sitting adjacent to parkland. Leagues are very concerned about the new language in the tripartite agreement that more clearly outlines the responsibilities of leagues, including to, but not limited to, grass cutting, line trimming, weed whacking, edging, planting and maintenance of flower beds, maintenance of shrub beds, and removal of weeds. This new clarification in the tripartite is required due to the shifts in City of Edmonton funding for turf maintenance. The challenge is this, that for the past 10 years, the city has provided turf and landscape maintenance for many leagues. Specifically, the city has provided support around amenities such as courts with fencing and inside rinks. This has allowed for Edmontonians to continue to enjoy these amenities, but also allowed leagues to use their limited operational dollars in more meaningful ways to support programs and events to engage the community. With the proposed changes in the tripartite, we have clearly heard the following. Leagues aren't sure where they will store this new required equipment to perform turf maintenance that's now expected of them. Leagues are unclear where they will find the additional operational dollars to do this work that is new for them, and yet comes with no additional financial support. Leagues don't have a clear understanding of the standards that would be required, specifically around the frequency of mowing, weed control standards, needs of naturalization that are being identified in this Reimagine report. Leagues are unsure if there are specifications that the city would want the grounds maintained beyond in good order and condition. So leagues are currently set up to provide social infrastructure to their communities. The changes that trickle down from Reimagine and into the tripartite could see them need to shift their priorities and focus much more on turf and landscaping maintenance. With the proposed changes we see towards strategic naturalization of parkland, we anticipate far more concerns from leagues as they continue to see increased use and demand for park spaces for recreational activities, from frisbee to soccer to football. And we do applaud the approach stated in the action that the city identified in this report around investing in a more comprehensive engagement and education action plan to support the work. However, we have not had any conversations about this plan. And as leagues partner with the city and Parkland Animation, we ask that leagues be part of this education plan before it's rolled out. Leagues often have to respond to neighbors who complain about turf or weeds, and they have to support and provide information to these neighbors. So with the additional responsibilities that leagues have for landscaping and turf maintenance and the additional changes through Reimagine of changes to turf maintenance, we ask that the EFCL and leagues be included in any new initiatives and receive sufficient support to be partners in park spaces to align with city priorities. While we understand that the city's approach to have and will continue to change, we need administration and council to understand that these changes in Reimagine will cause additional work and download of resources to our community leagues, our community-based organizations. Along with changes to the new tripartite, leagues will now be spending more time than ever paying attention to the turf and maintenance of their outdoor spaces instead of focusing on engaging Edmontonians. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next is Greg Raymond.
Good morning, Mayor Iveson and City Councillors and Administration. My name is Greg Raymond, and I'm the President of the Edmonton Firefighters Union Local 209 here in Edmonton. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to again speak about the Reimagine Services report before you today. The EFFU continues striving to be an engaged and collaborative stakeholder with the goal of being supportive of the City of Edmonton during a time of fiscal restraint. The issues that I'd like to bring to your attention are imperative for your consideration when looking at these recommendations as presented in the Reimagine report. I'd like to address three areas that are a concern for EFFU, Edmonton Firefighters Union, and our members. Number one, and you've heard it already several times this morning, is engagement. EFFU's engagement through the Reimagine process was not that of a stakeholder, and the opportunity for meaningful feedback or input was limited during the later stages when the work by KPMG was mostly complete and recommendations had already been identified. EFFU was removed as a stakeholder from the program and service review process in January 2020, as well as the challenge panel. After the project shifted to the Reimagine services, meetings with EFFU began in late 2020, well after the KPMG work was done, with a purpose to update us rather than engage with us. In February 2021, we were approached for ideas, but only if they contribute to the service reductions or cost savings. It is difficult for my executive and our members to support these recommendations as presented without being genuinely engaged during the process. We feel there are gaps in data analysis that have led to these recommendations. And this is in large part due to not being engaged as a stakeholder in the process. As an example of this is 2 days prior to the Reimagine report being public, a Reimagine update email to all of our members included a further 9 recommended areas for further opportunity to explore, in addition to the 5 recommendations put forward in the council report. This was the first that EFFU had heard of these additional 9 items and has caused uncertainty and anxiety amongst our members, as well as reduced confidence in the Reimagine process. The second item I'd like to bring to your attention is the deployment and response model. I want to clarify, as for yesterday, that all of our pumper units are currently staffed with 4 firefighters. The medical response unit pilot program includes a recommendation to eliminate 2 frontline pumper units from service. The crews that staff these units deliver a range of emergency services from stations 1 and station 5, including response to fire, alarm call, and medical incidents. It's important to consider that in 2018, a service need was identified for additional resources to support the downtown emergency response. Due to other corporate priorities and fiscally restrained time, Fire Rescue redeployed existing resources to place pumpers 1A and 5A into service in order to address the increased risk to firefighters and public safety associated with the growth in high-rise buildings, infill construction, population growth, and a significant increase of call volume to events in the downtown core. The increased downtown crews were essential to meeting NFPA response times and staffing standards, as well as meeting crew size best practices for firefighter deployment to high-rise building events as identified in the NIST study. The 2 pumper units have also increased response capabilities citywide as downtown emergency events now rely on units from outside the downtown core. The data analysis, to our knowledge, didn't take into account the impact to responses when subsequent calls would occur. Eliminating these 2 pumper units would have a ripple effect as other units would leave their primary response districts to respond to events downtown. It would potentially pose an increased risk to both the firefighters and public. We are being asked to fund a pilot program of medical response units by eliminating pumper units that respond to all types of emergency events, effectively reducing the fire event response capabilities. The last is the cost savings. The Reimagine Services report identifies a cost savings of $965,000 per year for the MRU pilot program. We feel this cost savings projection is misleading as it represents 10 FTE positions that will be moved elsewhere in fire rescue services. As described in the report, the reallocated funding is planned for priority initiatives such as enhanced outreach, mental wellness, training, and development. Again, we are limiting 2 pumper units so that we can fund a pilot program and move FTE positions into non-emergency response roles. In summary, EFFU supports the trial of these 3-person medical response units. However, we cannot support this trial at the expense of eliminating 2 frontline pumper units, decreasing service levels in the downtown community. Given the current opioid crisis and the majority of those calls situated in the downtown core, we believe there is justification and merit in funding a 2-year trial of 3-person medical response units to be deployed from stations 1 and 5, leaving pump 1A and 5A in service. This will allow for a proper evaluation and analysis of the MRU units. While it has been noted that MRUs have been successful in their jurisdictions, EFFU is only aware of Calgary and Vancouver having trialed these units. And while the trial failed in Calgary, our concerns that they don't work here in Edmonton, we'll have to come back to council to refund pump 1A and 5A back into service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. Right on time. Next is John Mervin.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And, okay, your timer started. Listening to administration present their report yesterday, there were a few things that jumped out at me, and there seems to be a common trend amongst it that is concerning. Dealing with green spaces, Mr. Seabrook said, although an initial investment is required to develop new strategic implementations, we expect future cost savings and a better use of green space. Well, the whole naturalization process eliminates green space for public to use. And again, right, Mr. Smythe had reducing the number of low attendance course offerings where the registration fees don't cover the full cost of what's going on. And again, they need to do some capital sort of investment, some planning to figure things out. But some of the data that they provided you is a little bit off. They've used 2018 numbers for classes, but that coincides with transitioning for the software that they use for registration. They moved from a class system to I think it's the Intelli system, and they were instructed to leave all of the classes, the ones that weren't running, in the system for the transfer to go over, where normally they would go into the system and remove the classes that were canceled, that they weren't running. So the numbers that they've used for KPMG are flawed, all right? The actual fill ratio is much higher than what it is. Then they talked about some of the contracting out about some of our rec centers and the Lewis Farms, and taking a look at contractors operating that. Back when Twilliger Recreation Center was opened up, they went through a bid process, and the city actually put in a sealed bid themselves to decide how to operate the facility, to put in what the city costs were. And the city came in much cheaper than all of the other bids put in by contractors. And again, showing that the city can actually run these things cheaper than the contractors can do. Increasing automation in our facilities. Again, they're talking about increased costs now for future savings. And this seems to be a general trend in what they're saying. So we need to spend more now in order that in a few years, so not this year, not next year, but in a few years, we're going to have some savings. And how often do the numbers that they project that they're going to save, how often do we actually achieve those targets? And right now is when we're suffering the most from COVID. As we're coming out of this and oil prices are increasing, we're going to have a better economy, and we're not going to need as many savings as will come from this process here. The other thing is to echo what Mr. Rahman had said from EFFU, is the city didn't really have a consultation process. They told us what was going on. They gave us the information after it was decided. It wasn't until the very end of the process that we were asked to comment on a couple of things as well. And throughout this whole process, the messaging that we received as well is that this was going to council, and council were the ones that were going to decide which options to go for. But then it's being brought forward as information. So the administration is just going to go forward with this, and unless you guys step in and put a hold on this. The other point of concern that we've got here is they've talked about council direction and administration is pursuing an expression of interest to solicit interest from external organizations to build and finance. But they needed, they commented that the operators, they need to be compensated for specific losses or the ability things that affect profitability, and they need assurances, especially in the Gulf area, that they would have autonomy over pricing. So this is going to cost our citizens more for what's going on there. So throughout this whole thing, all I've heard is we have greater costs right now for us to be able to do this, and it's going to end up with lower service levels. It's going to end up with higher costs to the citizens. Council's worked very hard to reach a 0% tax increase, and adding parking fees and increasing costs at golf courses and potentially reducing services are all just transferring the cost and the effects onto the citizens themselves. It's essentially another tax increase. One last comment as well about golf courses. They cited the percentages of 44% recovery and 83% recovery for them because there's a 26% reduction in golf. But in 2020, golf has seen an increase, and it's coming up. So there will be more profitability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mervin. Next is Lanny Chidick.
Good morning. I'm here today to speak to you regarding the administration's Reimagine proposal. It certainly was no surprise to me that the administration would attempt to run this through council without real scheduled public hearings. Initially, I was extremely concerned when during conversations with the administrative team leading the Reimagine process, we were informed that deputy city managers and branch managers were the stakeholders. Much to my surprise, as I thought employee groups and particularly taxpayers should be considered the stakeholder. Since a major point of Reimagine is the diminishing of core service or even the cutting of some core services completely, this should have warranted a full and transparent discussion with all. The city manager has commented on savings at every possible level, no matter how small. I would think that if that is the point, then leadership should lead. CSU 52 has presented reports outlining how the city can save many millions of dollars by downsizing a bloated, inefficient, ineffective management structure. Over the last few years, we have downsized our frontline unionized staff, union members who picked up the slack when vacancies have not been filled in a timely manner, while we have significantly increased management ranks. We have increased this management structure, we have also added a significant cost in regard to strategic advisors being attached to many of these senior management positions. With all of this managerial staffing and expertise, we then find it necessary to go outside and hire external consultants at a very significant cost. I believe somewhere around $1 million for the Reimagine project. I would suggest rather than a revenue problem, we have an administration that has a spending problem. Once again, we aim to hit frontline staff that do the actual work while avoiding the real problem, a bloated, overpaid managerial structure. Council needs to exercise their oversight of this administration. Moving to privatize, or as the administration likes to say, finding external providers, does not align with what a modern, forward-looking progressive organization is. This proposal would hit the most vulnerable staff in our organization, the lowest paid positions, women who generally inhabit those and people of visible minorities. This would also hit the most vulnerable citizens in our city, people who access these services now because they are either free or extremely low cost. This is not progressive, but in fact regressive. Asking senior administration to find cost savings is kind of like asking the fox to guard the henhouse. What do you think they will really come up with? Do you think they will point at a bloated, inefficient, ineffective management structure? No, they talk about downsizing the frontline service, the people in CSU 52 who I know have come in over the last 3-4 years, and particularly during this COVID pandemic, have come in early, stayed late, worked through breaks just to get the work done, while they've seen significant increases in new departments, new branch managers, new directors, new general supervisors, all the while watching their jobs quickly disappear, hiring private contractors, because that's what this proposal is. They will be paying their staff the lowest wages they can possibly get away with paying them. Service will be diminished. And once again, who pays for it? The taxpayer. I am really appalled and upset about how this process has taken place to this point. We were led to believe that this report coming to council was simply information. Council would be perusing it, and if council felt a public hearing was needed, it would be scheduled a week, 2 weeks from now. This is not a real public hearing. This is just the administration trying to ram something through that is not of benefit to the taxpayer. You know, my members have seen a number of initiatives over the last few weeks that certainly show what this administration, senior administration's values them as. Thank you very much.
Next is Steve Bradshaw. Was Mr. Bradshaw able to join us?
He had joined.
Give him another moment there. If not, we'll go ahead to Colleen Switzer and we'll loop back around, see if we can get Mr.
It does
Bradshaw
show
on
that
the
Mr.
line.
Bradshaw is on the meet.
Well, if we can't hear him, it defeats the purpose, so.
We'll reach out and see if
Yeah.
he's having some trouble.
Great, thank you. Okay, Colleen Switzer, are you ready to go?
I am, yes.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to appear today. I am a city employee, but I'm here today as a citizen. My name is Colleen Switzer, and I'm one of the several city employees whose job is in jeopardy if the city decides to privatize Fleet Services transit cleaners. As a bus cleaner for the city of Edmonton, my job involves cleaning and disinfecting all surfaces in the bus. This includes all windows, interior wash, vacuuming, fogging, deep cleaning, no matter the state the bus is in. With the pandemic, we have taken on more jobs as well as being more thorough and strict when cleaning to make the buses safe for the public as well as our fellow employees. We stepped up to the plate without complaint because we knew that the safety of our city was extremely important. We made sure that we worked to the city's safety standards and even going above what was asked of us. 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. After a difficult year of chemotherapy, radiation, surgery after surgery, and slow healing, I decided to apply to the city of Edmonton. I'd previously worked in sales for 20 years, and being told the amount of stress was putting on me was not healthy. And for me, my only option was to change into a different industry. I've also loved to clean and for many years had a part-time job on top of the full-time job as a residential and commercial cleaner. So working for the city as a cleaner is something I do enjoy. Becoming a bus cleaner has helped me mentally, but also physically, to regain the strength after my diagnosis. I've now worked for the City of Edmonton Fleet Services for 6 years and have hoped for many more up until retirement. Speaking on a personal level, the amount of stress that is now being brought on with the thought that someone like myself, who is too young to retire, but too old to start new, is being thrust back into the workforce to search for a job that may not even exist is hard to wrap my mind around. Those who have worked for the city for as long as I have or longer are now in limbo with their livelihoods. Many of us employees who are too young to retire, incapable of retiring, or who don't have enough of the pension to survive after losing our jobs are being unaccounted for as part of a faithful city employee. I've seen and heard firsthand from being in the garages with other employees the fear and worry that this possible decision has placed in them. I'm here today in hopes that you will reconsider the option to privatize. Not only are we employees, but we are a community. And as a community, we should consider the effect it would have on its members, no matter how big or small. And I just wanted to put a face to you people to let you know what a bus cleaner actually looks like and does. So thank you very much for your time and allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Switzer. I see Mr. Bradshaw there. Can we hear Steve now?
Yes, Mayor, I am back, and are you hearing me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, and sorry about my missed technology here. I'll say to you, good morning, Mayor Iveson and councillors, and thank you for creating this opportunity to speak about Reimagine. I'm Steve Bradshaw. I'm president of ATU Local 569, representing about 2,300 members of your workforce. I'm here to speak against the spirit of the Reimagine initiative from 2 points of view, that of taxpayer and that of a representative of the employees who work for the city. I'm an immigrant to Edmonton, having come here in the 1980s from places in the East. Once I got here, I knew it was where I wanted to put down roots, build a home, raise a family. I knew that because this place has community, it has culture and healthcare and education and incomparable parkland. The City of Edmonton excels at providing the incredible infrastructure and services needed and desirable in a modern urban center. Every time I look at the Walterdale Bridge, it takes my breath away. I love this place. Reimagine, as it is presented here, puts all of that at risk. I think it's time to add another re to reopen and reimagine. It's time to reconsider reimagine. This plan takes away needed services, and when the services are gone, the infrastructure will start to wane away. In coming years, the quality of life of average Edmontonians will wane away with the services and infrastructure. That will not be the Edmonton that inspired me so in the 1980s. It'll be a mean, profit-driven Edmonton, lacking in equity, lacking in culture and community. I do not believe this is the legacy you dreamed of leaving behind after your terms of office, and I urge you to reconsider the whole plan. I'm sure you're well aware of the request for proposals for contracting out of cleaning of buses, which is expected very soon. Certainly, ATU members have worked very hard to make you aware of it. This kind of initiative is a more dramatic and immediate example of the harm the Reimagine plan will do. Contracting out this work and other work like it throughout the city will cause immeasurable harm to the displaced employees and their families. And then it'll replace them with contractor employees who work for subsistence level wages and little or no benefits. When workers do not have access to paid sick time and every cent of their wages is needed to feed their family, they are inclined to take their illness to work with them. Not a desirable practice in a pandemic environment or any other time. Contracting out or outright canceling the many services identified in the Reimagine report will gut the city's workforce, and with it, it'll gut the city's control of the very services it is mandated to deliver to the citizens who foot the bill. In doing so, it'll displace hundreds of city employees and replace them with employees of corporate interests whose primary goal is the pursuit of profits, not the delivery of services. With that, councillors and mayor, I'll reiterate my call for you to reconsider this entire plan. It will not operate to the benefit of Edmonton's citizenry and will not contribute to a lasting positive legacy in your council careers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Julie Cusick.
Hello, my name is Julie Cusick. As you know, I've been a longtime advocate for accessible, equitable public recreation in Edmonton. I do not believe that the Reimagine Services update is in alignment with priorities of Edmontons in regard to recreation. It does not align with public consultation around the Lewis Estates Rec Center, the Scona Pool, Oliver and East Glen push, what the Rolling Miles Rec advocates have been pushing for regarding operations. It also doesn't align with the 2018 Thrive YAG city budget project that I undertook. I hope that you all remember that. In that project, I asked Edmontonians about the public services programs and infrastructure that make their lives better. I'd remind you to perhaps go and dig back up that report. Recreation in public spaces like parks showed up again and again and again, as did things like transit. This report does not achieve the kind of COVID recovery I think Edmontonians are looking for because it is inequitable. Will implementation result in different service levels, access and user fees in rec facilities across Edmonton? I'd argue yes. If a third-party vendor has autonomy to determine programming and fees, the most vocal and organized communities will end up with the best recreation offerings because they will say when things don't work well. And that's not the Edmonton that I want. I'd also like to know how specifically this will impact the wages of Edmontonians working in recreation. If we're working to eliminate homelessness and doing all of these other great things, we should really also be making sure that our public service delivery workers are also being looked after. Will some facilities end up being just for a few? And the reason I ask that, it was because through the Thrive YAG project, we identified that the leisure access program wasn't being recognized at Scona Pool. And families who didn't have the financial resources for a vehicle to go to another facility had to rely on Scona Pool, which they actually couldn't get into because they couldn't access the programming there. So we were sending a message to those kids in that family that, yes, here's a public facility, but it's not actually for you. And I don't believe that that's right. Now that problem's been fixed, but that's a case where advocacy got to that place. Whereas if it had been a city facility, city operated all along, we wouldn't have had that issue. So citizens also want to be able to consistently use a variety of rec facilities across Edmonton. Reimagine is making the system more complicated and less coordinated. Here's an example. Mount Carmel School is walking distance to Scona Pool. We wanted to get swim lessons going for the kids, and it didn't pan out for two reasons. One, the swim program offered at Scona Pool was not Red Cross, which meant that parents were spending this money for the swim lessons at Scona Pool, but it didn't align with the other programming they were doing throughout the city at other times in their life. The second thing, it was much more expensive. So ultimately it didn't work out. So I'd argue that the recreation side of this report is really barking up the wrong tree. I think that there are other ways that we could be looking at that. If you want to ask questions, we can. And I'd also pose the question about whether such wide-scale change to our public services should be decided by this council right now or the next one. I'd argue that perhaps we need a bigger conversation around our values as a city regarding delivery of our public services. I, for one, am more than happy to pay taxes towards ensuring we have accessible, equitable public services and spaces. Also, that my tax dollars are being used to ensure that my fellow Edmontonians working in these roles have a wage that is allowing them to live a good life, and that they're not so stressed financially that they themselves can access these services. So I'd just like to leave you with a note to remind everyone here that Edmonton is an incredible city. We are smart, we are prosperous, we are a desirable city to live, work, and play and raise a family. We are also kind and generous. So let's not save a few dollars on the backs of our neighbors. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mike Scott.
Yeah, good afternoon, or good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. Long time no see. I'm Mike Scott, past president of CUPE Local 30, concerned citizen and proud City of Edmonton rec facility operator, staff person. I'm just here to talk about a couple of things. I just wanted to point to the KPMG mandate. If you look at study after study that KPMG conducts, many of their recommendations to municipalities, from Windsor to Port Colborne to even some places in Europe, are to get out of the business of operating rec facilities, get out of the business of operating things that have a higher taxpayer load, even waste services. That seems to be the KPMG mandate. That seems to be the KPMG model, that they continue to do that time in and time out. Study after study conducted by many great organizations across the country and across the globe show that private partnerships do not work. Many municipalities who have entered P3 agreements have canceled them at higher costs. They end up having to pay the extra fees that are associated with it and pay out the existing contract. I just want to take a quick look at what was done before the Reimagine. We were doing when I was in office, we were doing an awesome service review that was conducted in-house, and it was conducted with consultation with the partners that have a key role in it, such as your union partnerships. It was going very well. There was one study that said, it's recommended to do it out of house, and thanks to the discussions you had with CSU 52 and a repurposing of it, the courier system ended up staying in-house based on being able to redesign it and based on our input. So I'd like to point to the golf course data. That golf course data is flawed. The data they used, the KPMG used, was from 2015 to 2019, excuse me. And that was when there was a global decline in golf course participation. It was something that was happening across the world. Interest in golf was declining. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and in 2020, there was a boom. 2021, there's a continuing uptick in the participation in golf courses. And I think giving it away to the lowest bidder would just put more money in their pocket and take less revenue from the city, as we see that there's an increase in the use. John already mentioned the Lewis Farms business model, and thankfully Linda Cochran, a general manager of what was then Community Services, said, if we can operate it this way, why wouldn't we? We'll get rid of the partnership. The cost recoveries are another thing. If you hand some of these facilities over to community partners, knowing that at some of them they're going to be operating at a 65% cost recovery, where are they going to get that money from? They're going to have to reduce staff. They're going to have to reduce service, reduce maintenance, operate the building at a loss, and only be able to maintain it for a couple of years and then turn it back over to the city in poorer shape than it is. Just take a look at the Kinsman Twin Arena. We do service the Kinsman Twin Arena at the city of Edmonton. However, our tradespersons don't really like going down there because of the shape it's in. If you want to look at community partner facilities, just take a walk into the Knights of Columbus Arena on the north side, and you'll notice that it's dirtier, the ice is not as well maintained, and there's not much personality in it. We take pride and we take ownership in operating these facilities. If you want to look at some cost recoveries, I think you have to look hard at the joint use agreement. Some of these hockey academies operate as a business and get the ice at a reduced or very low or to little rate. And then they charge, $3,000-$4,000 per student to access these ice rinks. And they're just, making money left, right, and center on this. I just want to wrap up by saying one of the pillars to the community is access to recreation. City administrations have to provide affordable access to recreation to these places, and by starting to farm them out, the access will be limited, the buildings will be shoddy, and the costs will go up. I just want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing some questions if necessary. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next is Corey Longo.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Happy to be with you this morning. I just wanted to share with you my experience. I live in Alberta Ave. I've been an Edmontonian for over 30 years, and I've been talking to a lot of Edmontonians and a lot of residents both north and south of the river lately. And even just last night, I had a meeting with about a dozen or so residents who live in Highlands, Bellevue, Virginia Park on the north side of the river, and I will tell you that each one of them was concerned about privatization, and they were concerned about the direction that the city is going. And, we've been down this road before. We know what happens when we privatize our public services, and I'm urging city councillors to scrap this report. We know that when we contract out, when we have third-party operators, what ends up happening is oftentimes profit is the priority, and so corners are cut. We have reduced services, reduced quality of services, and then a big part of that is the loss of good jobs. And I've listened to the previous speakers. I've talked to so many frontline workers. I've talked to firefighters and transit workers and clerical staff. And we know that those jobs are good jobs with family-sustaining wages and family-sustaining benefits. Lots of them have pensions, they have job security, they have good workplace condition. And right now in Edmonton, we're facing some struggles. We have high unemployment rates. People are struggling with affordability. So what we need to do is have more good jobs that will help stimulate the local economy and help people live better, healthier lives. So I just wanted to urge City Council to scrap this report. And, reimagining Edmonton is not a bad thing. Just in this way, I don't think it's the direction that we want to be going. And so let's reimagine Edmonton. Let's reimagine an equitable Edmonton, and one that is accessible, where people can access good quality services. Let's have great public amenities that we can be proud of. Let's have access to our parks and to our river valleys where everyone can participate, where we don't have to pay. And let's make the city of Edmonton operate and not as a corporation, but as an institution that can improve lives of Edmontonians. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Next is Brad LaFortune.
Thanks, Mayor Iveson, councillors, and thanks to the clerk's office for pulling this meeting together literally overnight. We really appreciate it. I also want to thank administration for taking on this very challenging task of reimagining our city's services, not only at a time of fiscal restraint, but during a global pandemic when we're all looking to come out of the tunnel, hopefully sooner than later. I'm a first-time attendee, first-time speaker. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bradley LaFortune. I'm the new Executive Director of Public Interest Alberta, pronouns are he, him, and I'm very humbled and honored to be joining you here on Treaty 6 territory, where I think we all do our very best to tread lightly with respect for the land. On a personal note, I want to thank Councillor McKean yesterday for his comments about parks and play. I think it's really important for us to remember that one of the best things about our city is how we can go through our parks, especially this time of year, when our city turns into a lilac factory, and see massive family and friends gatherings in parks, and people are there all day long, and they get to be there for free. Accessibility and recreation in our city is something that I think is very, very important. As for this report, councillors, I want to humbly submit 2 observations, one regarding process and one regarding substance, and a request that flows from those observations. First, on process and engagement. As Councillor Esslinger's question pointed out yesterday, the current actions before you were not subject to public consultation, yet they have the potential to impact not only our internal operations, but the quality, accessibility, affordability, and equity of services across our city. All of this would not be considered by Edmontonians if it weren't for the referral motion yesterday, so I want to thank the councillors for supporting that. But this isn't sufficient. While the report has been available now for 2 weeks online, I appreciate that. I'm receiving phone calls to our organization, PIA, and as an ambassador for Act for Edmonton every single day, calls and emails from Edmontonians who are very concerned about this process and the potential impacts on quality of services. And they're also asking about how they might engage further. So when it comes to sort of the observation from this new city manager about asking versus acting, I think the one quality that connects those two tensions is engaging in a meaningful way. Now, while many appreciate this opportunity today to engage, it's simply not adequate given the magnitude of the actions being considered here. This report says it aims to reimagine city services. It's a massive undertaking, as we see in this report. So on process then, while we understand the pressures you all are dealing with, based on the engagement our organization is receiving, I would humbly suggest a more fulsome engagement process before the blessing of this report, and especially the current actions that are being raised before council are moved forward on and further considered. Second, on substance. After having reviewed the report, I'm concerned about whether the city's own mandate and policies regarding services, procurement, employee relations can be met given the further devolution of responsibility being considered to new partners, primarily in the private sector. The city's mandate on behalf of the residents who pay for these services is to make sure they're accessible, affordable, and meeting the needs of communities to promote health and well-being. None of those things are in the explicit mandate of private partners. What happens to gender-based analysis, to living wages, health benefits, commitments to healthy corporate culture, collective bargaining relationships, and to a fair, safe, and healthy workplace if we proceed with the hollowing out of our assets and the operations of our facilities to for-profit partners? How can those qualities and those values be guaranteed? City Council unanimously passed a sustainable procurement policy that's supposed to be applied to the building of community infrastructure. To me, anyway, in my reading, it's entirely unclear how this policy has been considered against the KPMG audit or how it's concluded in the current Reimagine actions being considered now by council. Edmontonians cannot be sure that this policy is going to be followed to get maximum public benefits if the construction and or operations of our city facilities are privatized. And just a final comment on politics. I understand that politics is always in the background as we move forward and try to deliver services in our city, but we're less than 4 months away from a municipal election. Some of you are planning to be around when these reimaginings become reality. Some of you are moving on from your service as decision makers. But it's clear there's a growing conversation and debate right now about the way we move forward as a city, especially coming out of COVID. What I'm hearing from Edmontonians is that they want to strengthen what's great about our city and not cut to meet the bottom line. And in my view, there's no reasonable way to strengthen and protect public services and proceed on the basis of this report. So councillors, I'm asking you humbly but urgently to not accept the current actions before you, and please engage in a more fulsome engagement process on this Reimagine report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Christy Krasnowski.
Hi. I hope everyone can hear me. Good morning, Mayor Iveson, councillors, and all that are participating and watching. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just learned about this initiative last night, and I'm speaking to you as a citizen of Edmonton. My name is Christy Krasnowski. Firstly, I would like to thank Councillor Paquette for posting about this on social media. Had that not happened, I may still not be aware of this initiative. So I currently am in opposition to the proposal in its entirety. There are some aspects of it that I think I could support, like the potentially the naturalization of some of the municipal land. However, the piece that I felt was important for me to speak about today was the privatization of some of our city attraction, rec centers, arenas, and also the paid parking at some of our parks, and also the potential privatization of our city golf courses. During this time of immense economic crisis, our city parks and attractions are essential for our health and well-being right now. And adding additional fees on top of all the other additional fees that we've been experiencing over the last few years, I think is absolutely inappropriate at this time. For me personally, knowing that our city services, our city employees, provides me assurances that our charter rights and freedoms, our employment standards, our OH&S standards, and employee union protections are at some of the highest levels in this country. And knowing that workers have good supports and good work environments is important to me as a citizen. It's important that trust that I have when I walk through those doors or enter any of those parks is vital to me. Knowing that the city may be considering putting some of these services onto private entities, that trust is not there for me. So I would sincerely encourage you to not follow through on that part of the plan, not to mention some of the things that other speakers have talked about in terms of the impacts to employees. I realize that our city has taken a budgetary hit from budgets from the provincial government. I do understand that innovation, progress, and efficiencies are all important aspects to balance. However, this to me is very much looking like passing on more fees to Edmontonians when we're in the middle of an economic crisis. I'm greatly disappointed to hear that this report was generated by KPMG. Just as a personal stance, I find that municipal governments, provincial governments spend a lot of money on consultation processes, and instead of using internal employees and internal departments for some of those things, and I find it a very bloated, inappropriate use of funds. So on that note, that's what I have to say today. I certainly hope that there will be more opportunity for citizen engagement, because the reaction you're getting from me right now is a very knee-jerk reaction based on a very limited amount of time of being able to read about this. So I sincerely hope that this initiative is paused and there's more opportunity in the future to look at some of the aspects that are beneficial and some of them that absolutely need more consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lisa Brown.
Great timing, Mayor Iveson. I just changed baby's diaper. Thanks for enabling citizens to speak to this issue. I'm definitely not going to be as eloquent as some of our speakers, and I think Julie spoke to many of the issues that I would like to echo. Essentially, as a taxpayer, as someone who owns 3 properties in this city, I am very happy to have taxes go to equitable, well-paying, pensioned, well-benefited jobs, and do not want to see privatization of current city positions. I think one of the things that kind of jumped to my mind as I was reading through this report that was put online just for the meeting yesterday is the composter. I have worked in waste management and know that having a city facility that's operated and sort of operationally maintained by a contractor can have some dire consequences, including, essentially a building that returns to the city not in operational condition. So I imagine there's a risk, maybe less of a risk because it's less specialized, but there could be a risk with a facility like the Lewis Farms Recreation Facility, that there are certainly some opportunities for assets to be mismanaged when in private hands that are profit driven. The few other things that I'd like to speak to, I actually support parking fees. I think that land is precious and land costs are very real, and one of the things that's caused our city to have budget issues. And so I think administration has put forward a fair sort of compromise with the 2-hour free parking. We're starting to see mode shift. My partner and I are actually, we just purchased what's called a BackFit or a box bike. It's an electric cargo bike that has about 100-kilometer range. It's arriving today. And because of that, we will have access to city parks, and we will not be taking a parking spot when we travel or to recreation facilities. And so I think we need to encourage that mode shift to active transportation and public transit, and parking fees is one way to do that. Another thing, I personally think that city golf courses are not a good use of public land. And I would like to see, especially Victoria Golf Course, because we need more park space that's accessible to the core, especially to all of our residents. And closing Victoria Golf Course and converting it to a park would be an opportunity to shift the festivals and other events that happen at Horlock Park while it's closed over to Victoria Park during that renovation. So if there's some cost savings that could be realized by converting golf courses to parks, I definitely support that. I feel like that might be everything that I wanted to mention. But again, yeah, I am vehemently opposed to privatization or other organizations stepping in and operating our city facilities for infrastructure implications, wage implications, access. If that kind of privatization results in user fees increasing, that's something the city can certainly explore and hopefully do on an equitable basis. One point to that, so outdoor pools, I had spoken to council back in December that I think outdoor pools need to be separated from other leisure centers in terms of their costs. This summer is going to be interesting because you have to register to attend outdoor pools that are open because of COVID. But $8.50 for an hour of access for an adult to me seems quite expensive. And I would guess that in Oliver, where we have a lot of low-income folks that really loved outdoor pools when they were free, that we're going to see some low attendance. And I would really hate for that number or that data to support closure of a pool, which I think is actually a well-loved and well-used asset if the price point is appropriate for incomes in this neighborhood. And with that, I will turn it back over. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And last but not least, Rebecca Goldsack. Rebecca?
She has joined.
Okay, Rebecca, we're having difficulty hearing you. We'll give you another moment to see if you can unmute. I'm afraid we'll have to move on to questions unless we're able to hear from you. Okay, sorry about that. Not sure what the barrier is there, but Thank you all for your presentations. I will now open the floor to questions from members of committee and members of council. Councillor Walters, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks everybody for taking the time on a quick turnaround to get out here this morning and provide some pretty rich perspectives. Maybe I'll just go to Mr. Mady as a sort of umbrella voice of some of the labor organizations in the city. So you mentioned waste off the start as a failed privatization, maybe paraphrasing a little bit in terms of the commercial collections. Maybe just generally, noting that one of our primary objectives with waste, as an example, is to divert our garbage from landfill. So it requires a significant amount of innovation. It's a challenging service to provide when you think about those environmental objectives. Do you see room for innovation and creativity in public service, generally? I often have heard you speak to us about, keeping things as they are, as we've, tried to tinker around and make things what I describe as a little more innovative in how we deliver services. So generally, what room is there for innovation in a public service like waste or any municipal service?
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Actually, I can answer your question in two parts. The first part being when I was referring to the failed attempt to privatize, it wasn't the commercial services. It was actually the portion of the residential collection that has been privatized out that actually ends up costing more than it did when it was provided in-house. I can't speak specifically to the commercial one because I don't know. But when it comes down to innovation within public services, I think that there's actually a very strong and compelling argument that it can be done. Where it doesn't happen is when you consult with a company who has no stakes in what's happening. Where it does happen is when you actually consult with the people who do the work. I work for Canada Post, and while we are an arm's reach corporation from the federal government, I can tell you who is never consulted when there are changes happening. It's the people who know how to do the job faster and more efficiently. Who is consulted are the people who have never done the job in their life. So if there's time, I would
It's
definitely
a process question. I think that's about how we engage. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's not room for innovation. And
yeah, no, I'm saying that there is room for innovation, but where you're going to find it, you don't look. So that's the part of the problem.
It's notable that the most successful waste organization in the continent is in San Francisco, which is publicly regulated, privately operated with unionized employees. So there's different ways to skin that cat, so to speak. The consultant boogeyman gets raised a fair bit in these conversations, that there's ways for us to spend less money on consultants. But you did read the auditor's report on consulting services, which noted that the real problems were with coding and with change orders, not necessarily with the value that we get from consultants. That the increase in consulting dollars was pretty much connected to the increase in capital spending, which citizens have appreciated as we built more, facilities and amenities and renewed our infrastructure. So I'm not sure where all the money, all the savings comes from in consulting services, notwithstanding that the change orders was identified as something that needed to be fixed, but that's mostly on the capital side. So just a comment on that, because otherwise we're kind of looking at a 5 to 6% tax increase if nothing was to change in the coming years. So how do you square that?
Well, I mean, I would, I guess I maybe haven't seen the report that you're specifically talking to, but I do know, or even if we did implement all of these reimagined services recommendations, that would not account for the 5 to 6% increase. In fact, it would barely even adjust that. If you look at the 16 million over the next 6 years, that wouldn't even touch it. I think you're really looking in a place for efficiencies where there are none. And that's the problem, is that you actually need to be looking somewhere else if you are trying to find these efficiencies, because the amount that you're going to find here, and which is evident in the report, and I think anybody could see that, is that it's not going to have the results that you want. So stop barking up the wrong tree and start looking for the right tree is my suggestion.
Well, I'll have a second round, Mr. Mayor, on what the right trees might be, but I'll hang tight. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Banga?
Mr. Mayor, if there are any committee members before me, then they can go ahead. If not, I will.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, thank you everyone for coming out today. And my first question is probably, I think it's directed towards Ms. Farrow there. My question to you again is that you basically stated your dissatisfaction with this report. Would you be able to tell me that, I mean, there are 73 city services. Should the city be involved in all of those first? Okay. I think I lost my speaker.
Looks like. Carry on.
Anyway.
Sorry, who is that for?
That was for you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it. I'm here.
Okay. Anyway, my question to you was, the city is offering 73 services. Some of them, they are, we're in business of, I guess, toning down. Some we are not changing. In your mind, where should we looking at savings?
Where should the city be looking for savings is the question.
Yes.
I think where there's waste, where you can improve. Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that in a helpful way. But yeah, perhaps where there's room for improvement in public services, where there's missed opportunity. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time answering that more specifically and productively.
No problem. I guess I'll go to Mr. Joshua Wilczynski, is it? Anyhow, I know you raised some questions about golf courses, city doing double and triple jobs. Golf courses, should Edmonton be involved as a city in providing golf courses? Would you consider that a course service?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I think that providing opportunities for recreation at accessible price points falls within the jurisdiction and the mandate of City Council. If we are, and I think this is a big if we continue to proceed with maintaining public land as a golf course, it should be maintained and operated by the city. I know that there are other questions about whether or not we convert those golf courses to open parks, and I think that's a separate conversation. Pointedly to your question, if we are going to be in the business of keeping that land as a golf course, it should be retained for public access at accessible price points and operated by the city.
Thank you. Mr. Bradshaw, could you be able to tell me, you went through the report and you you and I also talked about it a couple days ago. If you were to agree with some of these recommendations, what would those be?
Sorry, Councillor, your question was for?
It was for Steve Bradshaw.
Mr. Bradshaw, are you still there? Looks like we've lost Mr. Bradshaw, I'm afraid.
Mr. Marvin, you could probably help me with that.
Yeah, I think one area that you can look to find savings is with the contracts themselves. We always see reviews about city workers and how the city can do its business better, but we never see evaluations on the contracts and the services provided by the contractors. And I know I've talked numerous times about this, but the services we get include a markup for that we're paying for the private contractors, and the money is going, the profit is going out of the province in a lot of cases. So reviewing our contracts, who we've got contracts with, the costs associated with them. We probably get good service for the first year, but then they try and find ways of cutting the costs inside there, which reduce the services. So I haven't seen a review of contracted services in a long, long time. And I think that would be an area that you could find some savings.
Thank you.
Councillor Paquette?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see that Councillor Walters is on the board for the second round, but he's a committee member. I'm happy to defer.
No, you're on the first round. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out and speaking and sharing your thoughts. For some reason, my video isn't working, and I apologize for that. So I guess my first question then would be for, oh, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. You're working with cleaning services, and I was just going to ask, the city has a gender-based analysis plus policy, which basically means, if you're not familiar with it, is that we try to make our decisions with a number of lenses in place. And one of those lenses is the experiences of people who are minorities, or in this case, like women, or people who have disabilities, or people who are in poverty, and all sorts of different circumstances. And I'm just wondering if you feel that that this move is in line with operating through those lenses and making decisions based on those lenses. And because I lost your name, I didn't write it down when I was making my notes.
Are you meaning Havana?
Colleen Switzer?
Yes, thank you. That is, yeah.
And I believe her name's Colleen, but yeah, it said.
Colleen, are you still there? Are you able to take Councillor Paquette's question?
You know what? I'm looking through the list of names right now and I don't see it. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to ask Christy a question. Christy Krzyzanowski. I'm just wondering, as Councillor Walters stated, and he's absolutely correct, we have to find innovation. We have to find new ways of doing things. And, administration kind of got this consultant work done, and this is what has come forward. And I'm just curious if city staff were asked for their ideas, and if those ideas were workable, or if they came forward. Because I know that we even gave an award to a city staff a couple of years ago for an innovative way of making a tool to open a grate, and it was actually really clever and very simple. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned when I was speaking, I'm just learning about this initiative. It's been, 16 hours. But what I can say is in my previous employment experience with the provincial government and in nonprofit, I'll speak specifically to provincial government, working with consultants. Typically, they do ask employees for a lot of their data, but I don't know if in this specific circumstance, employees were asked for these efficiencies. I can say that I do appreciate some attention towards innovation. As a former resident of the city of Vancouver, I can see the direction that Edmonton is wanting to go in. And I do value that. However, our transit system is not there. We have a very different sprawl situation here than what we have in other big urban environments. So, yeah, I'm losing my train of thought to your question. So,
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so what I do know is that the municipality has a great wealth of employees and information, and I think that you can find some benefits through that. So I'm going to stop there. I do have a question for later if that's an
Oh,
opportunity.
you know what? If there was a question you wish that I would have asked you, feel free to.
The question that I'm wondering is in this naturalization portion of the project, is there revenue ideas within that? So, you know, what I'm seeing over the last year or so with the reduction in cutting and those kinds of things, are we looking at hay bales out of some of those things and selling those to animal owners? Are we looking at maybe opening up some of our backyards to small goats that people could have, you know, mini goats, and some of those natural weed areas could be utilized by people taking those animals to parks? Or, you know, because some of those ideas would have impacts on revenues. People would need to purchase permits for those kinds of things. Just wondering, in that aspect, are we looking at ways where some of those lands could be used to generate some funds, as opposed to just this typical process of let's make people pay for parking, let's make people pay more to go to a golf course? I'm curious about that.
Out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson is next.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore something a little bit further with Ms. Kuziak, because I'm remembering some of the things that you brought to us a number of years ago, and it strikes maybe just as a kind of preface to my question. It strikes me that there's two pieces to the conversation we're having today. One is about how we provide services, but the other one is about what services we provide and how we pay for those services. And I just wanted to explore that second half a little bit, because I think you were alluding to it. Because one of the things that intrigued me about this Reimagine question, but it means a public conversation to do it, discussion, is, in the trade-off to trying to keep taxes low, what do people actually want for their taxes? What are the services they're actually prepared to trade off against? And I think that's an important conversation we need to have. And I think the Reimagine, what kind of city we want, what are we prepared to pay for? And the trouble is we always have the tax cut conversation without understanding necessarily what that's going to cost us in terms of those services. So I'm just wondering, going back to, and I'm eager to have that conversation, because maybe there's things that people don't want as much as we think they do. But I'm going back to the work you did a number of years ago. I'm wondering if there's any insights you can share on that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental question we need to ask when we are reimagining is, as a city, as our public services, where do we want to prioritize putting that? And I think there is a real question as to whether some of the things we're trying to cut in order to make sure that our tax increases are not substantial, are not necessarily in alignment with people's priorities. And so based on that Thrive YEG project I did in 2018, off the top of my head, a lot of the things that people really valued were things like library services, recreation centers, open park places, our river valley. And some of those things just really got to people's heartstrings as fundamental things that were really important to them. Things that I didn't get stories from, and maybe this is one person doing a consultation as best I could in the time period I had available. I didn't hear people saying, I really value the extra lane on this highway or this freeway in the city. And I think if we are really serious about reimagining how we spend our money, I think it's fair game to start talking about that. When we widen a road that has a whole lot of extra costs associated with it, when we talk about how people are moving in the city, there are less expensive ways and more expensive ways to do that. We can also talk about things like when we are building new infrastructure that has a particular focus that benefits more of a local population. You know, maybe we talk about a short-term toll. For example, we're widening a road in a certain area. Maybe there's a short-term toll that's there just to cover that capital cost. Or maybe when we are building the recreation center, you've heard me talking about rolling miles. Maybe we have a levy for the area surrounding there that's in place just until those capital costs are paid off. Sorry, that was a lot of time.
Well, it leads me to the other part of the question, which is how we pay for stuff. Because it strikes me, you know, there's a principle of universality here that ties into the GBA plus kind of lenses we're putting on this, that you want access to everybody. One of my impressions whenever we have these debates at budget time is everybody wants to cut other people's stuff. And I, you know, and I was wondering if that was a conversation you were able to have as well, is how much, what are things that we say the people that are actually using it should pay for it, and what are things that we think need to be universally provided to Edmontonians, recognizing that some people may use them and some people may not. Did you get any feedback from that?
Yeah, that's a key point. And that was one of the really interesting things about that project. We brought it to City Council during the 2018 budget debates, is we said, we're not fighting for this one versus this one. What we're saying is these things are all important to different people, and we all pay taxes as people in Edmonton. And it's important that whether I use these services or my neighbor use these services, they're important to somebody for a different reason. And because we're in this together as a community and as a city, it's important that those things are available. And in terms of who pays and how they're delivered, I think it's the city's job to do the unglamorous, unprofitable stuff and to pay for that through the accumulation of tax dollars.
Great, thank you. I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Walters is next.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So maybe I'll ask these questions of Mr. Chudik, if he's still on the line.
Still here.
Yeah. Hey, Lanny. So, you know, you're very familiar with the refrain that the biggest cost driver for the city is its workforce, which is not surprising. I think that's probably the case for most cities, right?
I would think so, yeah.
You'd think so. I think so too. But truthfully, the biggest cost driver, I would say, of how many people we have or need or services we provide is the way that we grow. So the sort of built form of the city, how spread out it is, how many roads, boulevards, parks, all the stuff that requires maintenance. If it's an inefficient city, it's just going to be inherently more expensive. You agree with that?
You know, absolutely. If you are going to expand your organization and your infrastructure, it only makes sense to think you need to expand your operating staff.
So our work as a council, the two councils that I've served on, I think have been, pretty focused on, making the city a little more dense, a little more efficient, financially, environmentally. So I do wonder, and I always do appreciate the advocacy of the labor unions. I wonder why you haven't been a stronger voice, or why labor hasn't been a stronger voice on a denser city. So, for example, when we have some of the more controversial infill projects that we can draw a straighter line from higher density in certain areas to more cost savings over the long run, we don't see the labor community weigh in on those in support of those projects when we often have a lot of opposition to them.
Well, honestly, Councillor Walters, I don't think the labor organizations have gone out and opposed infill.
I'm not saying you have. I'm just saying you haven't supported it either.
Yeah, and maybe, well, I wouldn't say we haven't supported it. I think we just haven't weighed in on it on a very significant way. One of the concerns I certainly have is I certainly agree with you. We continue to talk about how we need to do infill to have a more effective city to be able to, because as we go outside, sprawl certainly costs money. And the more you sprawl, the more it costs. You have all that infrastructure that goes with sprawl, and I personally would certainly support that. I do have to say I've been kept very busy the last few years by an administration who continually tries to find cost savings by pointing out and picking on frontline workers.
Right. Well, I think that, our suburban communities have certainly gotten far denser and more efficient than some of our older communities in their original form. So I do think it would be, I just want us to, look at the whole picture. I think administration is trying to find efficiencies because councils ask them to, and partly because we have 30 years or 40 years of having built a city that is not actually very, very efficient. So we're kind of trying to reconcile that these days. Maybe, a similar question, Mr. LaFortune, having some familiarity with your organization and you're new to it. I also see that Public Interest Alberta in its kind of suite of issues and action campaigns hasn't traditionally weighed in on those more urban planning issues, progressive urban planning issues, which, supporting, significant densification of our city in spots to ultimately make the city more vibrant and more affordable. I just wondered why that was.
Thanks, Councillor Walters. I appreciate it. Without making excuses about the size and might of our organization as to a reason why we're not engaging on everything, I think certainly welcome the invitation to engage with the city on how we move and how we grow inwards and up. Personally, I think it's important for us to be thinking about that. But, in terms of process, while we're talking about engagement on the subject of Reimagine, I just want to reiterate while I have 2 seconds to say that I think there's an opportunity for us to do a better job of engagement on this as well.
Sure. And what I'm trying to do is just tie the whole thing. You can't look at this in isolation. This is a product of a city that has been built very inefficiently. So we're sort of behind the 8 ball in that regard. But thanks to everybody for their contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Katarina is still on the first round. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to everybody for their presentations. This question is just some clarification for Mr. Ariman, Greg. We talk a lot about core services, what they should be, what they shouldn't be, 72 lines of business for the city, and on. But they're not all equal. So with fire service, certainly my definition or your definition, I hope are the same, is the core service. But with that, give me some of the technicalities of it. You're not just a core service, you're an essential service.
Yes,
that's a different designation than a core service being cutting grass, for example, or running a rec center, that sort of thing. You are considered an essential service, which has limitations on what you can do. And certainly it's out of context, as far as I'm concerned, with you being lumped in with this Reimagine as just a department. So if you could speak to that, please.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilor Katarina. Absolutely, you're right. There definitely is a difference in the core versus essential. Again, our service is based on, science, data, and best practices that's been accepted by this council and put into place. So everything that we have currently in place right now is based on what the science and data proves and is best service to the public for safety of not only the firefighters, but the public in general. And so when it comes to, I guess, being lumped into this project, I guess that's part of our concern. Number one is that during the service level review, when we actually have a stakeholder engagement early on and part of the process, I believe a lot of these recommendations that come out of the Reimagine process were actually probably even already on the table to begin with. So the fact that we had to spend the amount of money we did on KPMG to provide this report, I strongly believe a lot of these things would have been talked about and debated and probably would come to a lot better resolve that's palatable for everybody had we just been engaged from the get-go. And, you know, we talk about the cost of the Reimagine team, or sorry, the KPMG part of it. You know, to part, I believe her name was Christy, you know, she talked about the employees in the city. And we've always said that we have great employees. You know, one of the city's mantras is that our employees, we want to engage them, we want to value them and empower them. This is a prime example that could have happened. That we have tons of technical experts, not only in fire rescue, but for all of our services across the city that could have had input and probably could have come up with a lot better ideas than having to pay for a company. And then we also have staffing hours. So how many staff hours were on this project as well? So the $1 million for KPMG is probably eclipses the total staffing hours that were paid out in wages to those on the Reimagine teams.
And just a clarification, I heard yesterday from administration that the recommendation for the pilot project will not affect the two pumpers. You this morning have said that the pilot actually does affect the removal of those two pumper units. And just to put it into context, because a lot of the services are for downtown and the densification and building up rather than out. So now we have a 65-story Stantec tower, and that might not be the biggest going forward. You need those pumper units in order just to provide basic service for where we're asking people to live and work. So if you can just talk a little bit about that, please, and clarify whether those pumpers are going because of the pilot or not. We heard that they were not.
Well, so I think what I heard yesterday, and again, it's in the KPMG, I guess, the Reimagine report to council. I haven't seen the KPMG report either, so I have no idea what's in there. But the clear expectation is with the pilot of these two MRU units is the removal, the elimination of pump 1A and 5A. We may have heard them referred to as additional pumpers. That's probably a wrong context to use. These are not additional pumpers. These are pumpers that were put into place, again, through the work of this union and the fire administration of the day, when the recognized need of the ICE district was coming downtown, the infill, the densification of the downtown. We had a need downtown that needed to be met. And again, science and data drove that desire to have it happen. And we were able to, again, between the not having to have a consulting company come in, and we came up with a solution internally, and we're able to stack those trucks downtown to meet that need. So now the removal of those trucks, now we've lost that response capability, and the MRUs is only going to take the medical component away from it. But now there's a ripple effect again outwards. When we have first call, second call, third calls, we're going to start to see that drain again in the upline areas of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Reman. I'm out of time here.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McKean?
Yeah, I wondered if I could jump into the queue.
Yeah, certainly. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to follow up with Greg on that because my reading of this is a little bit different, and I want you to tell me if you think I'm wrong. That the pumpers are going to a lot of medical calls, a lot of them being sort of man down, a lot of overdose calls. And that effectively takes that pumper out of the queue for any other, if there was a fire call to Stantec Tower, for example. So I'm wondering if there's actually a potential for efficiency, and the pilot will either prove that out or not, that yes, there might be a couple of pumpers taken out of service downtown. One would hope that they would have backups ready close by, but in effect, right now, you have a lot of pumpers being taken out of service anyways because of all the emergency medical calls, sadly, in part because of the opioid overdose crisis. What are your thoughts on that, Greg, please?
Well, first of all, I would never say that you're wrong. That would be...
Well, no, I mean, I could be wrong, believe me.
I think, I think as to yesterday's, it was talked about, that yes, when our pumpers are going to medical calls, they are essentially out of the call queue for the next fire call, etc. I guess the thing is that when they are not on those medical calls, when we do have a fire response, especially in the downtown core, those two pumpers, specifically for Station 1 and Station 5, now they are going to those fire calls, and those trucks are now available for what they're intended to be there for. So the medical calls, yes, they can be taken out, but again, we have other trucks downtown which provide that. Taking two pumps out of downtown really creates, in my mind, is you're going to have a gap right off the hop. You're never ever going to have those ones available. Whereas right now, they're available a lot more than they would be if they're completely removed or eliminated.
All right. So, but let me throw this at you just so I'm completely clear. Those pumpers get called out to the fire, report of a fire downtown, and then there's emergency medical calls that come in. So I'm just trying to get at how we more efficiently handle or utilize the equipment and staff we have, because obviously they're critical to the safety of Edmontonians. And I just, having experienced the opioid overdose crisis in this city for the last few years and the impacts on the downtown of that. So like I say, your pumper trucks go out to a fire call, and then there's emergency services calls that come in. Those have to be filled from somewhere, no?
Yeah, so I mean, to your point, that's correct. So if they go on those calls, then we're going to have to pull a pump from a different area to come to those calls. But again, if all of our pumper trucks in the downtown core are busy on fire calls or other type of calls, then I guess AHS would, through their, dispatching, would look at what's our closest pumper available, and the time response that we were supposed to get there in may not be feasible to bring an outlying pump into that call, because AHS will arrive on scene before us, unless again they need our assistance when it comes to a high level, we call them echo calls or delta calls, where there's a high level that they require the extra hands or lift assist, etc. And
right.
Yeah.
So I apologize. I was at a special appointment this morning. I couldn't cancel, but so I didn't hear it, Greg. Are you opposed to the pilot? Skeptical of the pilot? Do you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think to your point, is that how do we truly measure the effectiveness of this pilot if we don't have what we currently have in place, and now you add it? How do you say this is achieving this if you're taking those trucks out of service? So again, we already have the staffing available, and we're hiring a class here in the fall. There's going to be additional boys coming on then. I think again, internally, we should have the ability to move our staff to do this pilot program. And again, I'm not sure if you heard my presentation earlier on, but the concern becomes is that this pilot program, if it fails, like it did in Calgary, and Vancouver is the only place in Canada that I'm aware of that does this program, then what happens? Now they're gone, and now we have to come up to council and say, council, please give us the staffing back for pump 1A and 5A. I think it's a backward way of doing business. I think let's handle it internally. Let's try and staff it internally first, not ask for additional money, not ask for additional FTEs. Let's accomplish it the way we did before with pump 1A and 5A downtown.
I really appreciate your advice on that. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Councillor Banga?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chudik, it looks like you are itching to be figuring out in this discussion here. As it, I think, apparent to me in today's discussion, it is, and it's a twofold discussion. One is about what was being proposed, and the second one is how was it brought in? Which one is your main concern at this point in time, or your organization's concern?
Well, thank you, Councillor Banga, for the question. So let me just say this. How this has come forward is of extreme concern to me, because we were not considered stakeholders. We were given the benefit of some updates from the management group that was running Reimagine. And we were assured that this proposal coming to council was merely being brought forward as information. Council would look at it and would decide if there were to be public hearings a week from now, 10 days from now, whenever they decided it was appropriate, if they were going to go down that road. To bring this forward and expect it to be shoved through right now is, I think very disrespectful of the citizens of Edmonton. These are their core services. These are their parks. These are their arenas and rec facilities. And to move forward in this manner without full, complete information being out there for everybody to take a look at, and then come back and have a fulsome discussion on all of the information is disrespectful and extremely arrogant. And I, as a taxpayer and as union president of CSU 52, are very offended by this. Of course, it's not a big surprise to me because we see this in the organization every day for the last couple of years here. Once again, I urge council to take control and have oversight of this and demand that full KPMG report be released publicly. The public, the community leagues, everybody needs to be able to see exactly what's being proposed. And one last comment. When you deunionize, and that's simply what this is deunionizing the city to a significant degree, and you move those services somewhere else, they are not cost-free. And at the end of the day, taxes probably aren't going to go down, but user fees will go up. And so the most vulnerable people in society are going to be deprived of a number of opportunities they have now for recreation.
Okay. So let me put it this way. If you are a city administrator or even a councillor, you would start looking at some possible savings, where would you be looking for?
Well, I think if we're going to look at savings, we need to look throughout the organization, not just start at the middle and work down. I mean, when we hear that we need to go to private external providers to cover off gaps in service, if there are gaps in service, it's only because our frontline services have been diminished over the last number of years. I mean, CSU has brought forward some reports for council and to public where we have talked about since 2017, there's been approximately a 4 to 6% decrease in frontline unionized positions and a significant increase in management positions. If you're picking up garbage, hiring another branch manager isn't going to help you pick up the garbage if you don't have enough staff to do it.
Thank you. And one more question I'm going to ask. It's again for Ms. Cusick. I know you are opposed to reimagining. I just wanted to hear your comments about, we get all sorts of emails from one to another, some like this, some like that. In your mind, what would be our core services?
Well, I've got 4 seconds left on the clock, so I don't know if I'm allowed to go there or.
No, that's the Banga maneuver, that we all do it, is to ask the question right up to the clock. So you may answer mindful that the councillor's time is up, but you can offer a quick response.
Okay, thank you. So I think the core services that a city has to provide are the types of things that are required to live a dignified life within our city, and a life that, so sorry, I'm not being very quick here. I need to be quicker. So things like the recreation is something that I really keep going to because that helps us to be healthy, that helps our social fabric to be connected with one another. It helps us build our communities. So I think, and that's not a profitable thing. So that is something that should be a core service. Are things like our utilities, those are core services that our city needs to provide, right? And our garbage and all of that. Things like our roads, and providing for transportation opportunities in a variety of modes, that's a core service. So I don't know. Anyhow, we're out of time to continue the dialogue, but you know, off the top of my head, that's it. Or that's part of it. Sorry, not it, part of it.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll go to, I've got two questions, so we'll try to keep them brief. But Bradley LaFortune, one of the things that we know is that household income has been decreasing over the decades, and it is in line with the decrease of the strength of union work, and that is often based on municipal decisions and how we employ people. And so I can understand the concern that what we see is less money in the economy, but at the same time, it's because of pressures to reduce taxes or the tax cost to residents. And yet it seems to be sort of this downward spiral back and forth between reducing taxes, but then reducing incomes on average, because the private sector often follows the public sector in salaries. So I'm just wondering, how do we break this cycle in a way that makes sense to residents?
Thanks, Councillor Paquette. I appreciate the question. You know, it's certainly a question, a conversation that I think that we're seeing within Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and beyond, is how we break this downward spiral that you describe of the way in which there are immediate or short-term pressures to reduce costs and meet the bottom line, but long-term pressures to maintain a healthy city, province, or country when it comes to real wages and the real economy, to be able to sustain those services, even at the levels that we're maybe potentially decreasing them at. I think that it's important for getting to the point. I think it's important for us to look at the revenue side of the equation. I understand that we can say that we're constrained in this conversation today and in the short term because of decisions that have been made by this council regarding property taxes, and also the complex relationship that we have with the province of Alberta as a city currently, and other partners as well. However, if we're talking about the long term here, Councillor Paquette, I think we really need to think about how we fund these services with sustainable revenue, so that we aren't in this long term problem where we're actually being, I think, penny wise and pound foolish. And so I think you have that conversation with residents, to Julie's point earlier, and others, about what kind of services we care about and want to ensure we maintain and strengthen, and also how we maintain and strengthen them. But let's have that conversation with Edmontonians transparently and in a really engaged way about the trade-offs.
Sorry, I'm running out of time, but you made good points. So my question then is very simple: yes or no? I understand that it's my responsibility, but is there a responsibility for everyone at the table today to be having that conversation, a robust conversation with the public? Because it's not going to get better if we don't. So do we all have that responsibility?
Yes, we have that responsibility.
Okay, it's kind of rhetorical, but I think it needs to be on the table. Okay, so I want to shift gears, and I'll just kind of, again, it's a very simple question, but it's for some of our union representatives who are here today. And the question is, understanding the constraints we're in, but also understanding that there may be like some amazing opportunities here to innovate. Would you be willing, if you had time, would you be willing to work with the city and with each other to not just find cost savings, but to actually like find ways that would really transform how we're delivering services for the better? You know, being creative and really workshopping this so that we could present something that's a little bit more in keeping with the values of Edmontonians.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, we would be delighted to engage in that kind of conversation.
Okay, and to the union representatives who are here, just a simple yes or no, if you'd be willing to do that.
Yes, Councillor Paquette, we have offered to do that, but we have been considered not stakeholders, so.
Okay.
Yes, from BP Local 30 as well, and I echo Lanny's comments.
Yes, from EFFU, and again, outside of the Reimagine project, we have brought ideas, and we have been engaging with our fire chief and others on other type of things moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm out of time.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions at this time. We're coming up on noon, so my suggestion would be that we requisition this back to council.
I'll join you.
Okay, so Councillor Walters and I will requisition, and that just moves it back up to council for discussion on July 5th, where we'll pick up with the motion that was on the floor with respect to the parks and parking piece, as well as further questions of admin arising from the reports and the presentations here today. So you can tune in on the 5th when we come back to this in due course. Thank you all for your comments this morning and answers to the questions and engagement. So appreciate the perspective, and we'll carry on in a couple of weeks' time on this. So the special meeting of the Executive Committee has served its purpose, so I will declare it adjourned at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.